Alright, today we're going to start actual work on this beauty here, the Mirelurk Queen. I'm going to be doing this entirely in contrast paints and in two stages. So first stage is going to be to get the baseline colors down, and then the stage after that will be to apply some more detail work to it. You'll notice I'm also using some nitrate gloves that I have for resin 3D printing in order to keep my hand oils off the model as I am working on it without it being mounted to a base. My hands are fairly acidic, I find. I've ruined many a playing card, so that makes it easier. So I'm using a palette that I saw posted on the Wasteland Warfare Facebook group by Oliver Rydell. I liked how his came out, so this is basically my adaptation of it. The base colors are going to be identical, and then I've gone with slightly darker detail colors, so we will go from there. So what we're doing is we're going to be using contrast Guilliman Flesh for the face, Skeleton Horde for the talon pieces and the spikes, Agros Dunes for the top of the shell, and Basilicum Gray for the primary pieces of the body. Right. Just double checking my notes. So, in addition to those colors, I'll then be adding some blues, reds, and darker browns, kind of mixing them together in a wet blending to kind of make it more lobstery. Now, as far as mounting to the base, this tab here is a primary mount, and then additionally this little bit of stone here, and this kind of flat bit there will sit. So I'm going to try and mostly get the bottom sections done, and then probably mount it to the base before I move on to doing a lot of the top work. This is primarily based in the white Wraithbone, with the top being done over with some gray and down the back, just because I want those to be a little darker. So then I want I left the internals as white because that's more of the fleshy bit. Alright, so first we're going to go ahead and start off by doing the face. So that is going to be done in Guilliman Flesh. I have no intention currently of watering any of these down, so I don't really need to use my palette or my contrast medium, but I do have them on standby. So I'm just going to go in here and start work up into the shell and just kind of get this. Let's see, we've got our spouts. We all hate the spouts that spew the poison. We really want to get up under that shell there. You can almost treat this like gums in a mouth, coming up under that shell there. And then I'm not going to drag this along too much, simply because I'm going to try and blend this a little into the gray. Now you can't really see, it's just a little difficult, but she does have, try and show this off here, little mouth parts here. So those we're going to try and get later. But if we don't, that's not a huge deal. No one's really going to see them. I'm basically using the cutoffs of the body here to know where to stop with this color. And I'm going to apply it pretty heavy at the spot where I'm quote-unquote stopping. So as I said, I can kind of wet blend those together. So yeah, let's just get all into those spouts and little mouth feelers here. Make sure we've covered all of that. I'm going to kind of come under here. It's got this little kind of V area just beneath its little hands there. So what I'm trying to do is fill in that V. And get up into the mouth itself. We can go back in and add some reds and whatnot to kind of pick out the mouth later. For now, we're just trying to get these basic colors in. Apply a bit more pigment around there. And that looks to have gotten pretty much everything. Yeah, there we go. And you can just see how chunky she is. There's a lot of detail as far as the ridges and folds in the flesh that really look great with contrast paints. Alright, so now I'm going to move immediately into the Basilicum Gray. And for the kind of pincers, I'm not going to worry about kind of coloring the spine. Same with the legs. We're just going to go in here and just try and... First, I'm going to do this layer that's closest to the mouth. And first I'm kind of cutting a line close to it so I can get my paint down, because I don't want the color mixing as I'm still pulling paint out of the pot. And now that I've got it down, I'll just add a bit more here. Kind of up the face claw there. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and kind of blend these two areas together. This kind of contrast is easy to kind of push them in to each other and let them run naturally. So I'm going to pull this, all this black, this Militarum Gray I've got up and into there. And the same on the face arms here. Try and get in there a bit. Just try to spread that there. Alright, so that's all the mixing we want done there. So we're going to clean our brush so we're not contaminating our source. And then we're just going to kind of start working on the rest of it. So we're getting these grabby mouth hands. One thing about contrast is it can flow so much that the areas you thought you had gotten get uncovered. So right here, this spout that I was pretty sure I coated, it's already shown through to the primer, so I'll just have to fix that in a later application. Okay, now up and under here. This section around the mouth is the trickiest. Trying to make sure not to flick paint into the areas I've already done. Alright, good. And now we'll just start working on the next set of claws. These claws all have really nice detail on them. All these bumps and recesses. So we're just going to blend all of this together. Try and make sure we're working into some of the recess spots, because it will be very natural for it to trap air instead of paint. And I think what we're going to do is just focus on one side. We'll come back around after it dries for the other one. It's just easier to hold and work. It is very spiky. This is very much like working on GW Tyranids, in that any moment it could inflict pain upon you. There are many a model that I have left blood on, I swear. If it's not Tyranids, then it's Legion models for War Machine. And you can kind of see where the brown and the gray have kind of blended there, which is what we wanted to do. And that's going to be what we're doing with the second set of colors, is primarily working to blend them all together to duplicate the kind of mottled coloring you'll see on some lobsters and other crustaceans. And I've painted up a few of my regular Mirelurks in the same kind of scheme. Basically use them as tests for the technique I was going to use. And that means when they're sitting together they'll all kind of look the same, which is what I want to go for. Here we come under that big old shell. We got these arm sets in the mid-body there. Using these gloves will mean that I'm at much less risk to damage that primer. Into this chest section. And whittle itty bitty claws out the front here. Make sure we've got all of those covered. Alright, now into these lower legs. And obviously these, while these are showing off ridge detail and stuff like that, they are also kind of boring because it is just one color, but that's why we're going to go back over it and mix together some more colors. That will really help break it up and make it much more of a beast of the deep. Try and keep an eye out as you're painting each section as to if any of the previous sections, as I mentioned, are missing. Especially at the tips of legs and that sort of thing. Contrast doesn't dry right away, so it's always pretty easy to go back and fix any that have happened that way. Alright, one more leg down, on to the next. I'm not overly worried about the rock at the end of this, because what's going to happen with that is once I attach it to the base, then I will paint it and kind of match it to the rock that's on the base. And I want to do it beforehand because fumes from the super glue when I join the pieces will damage whatever paint I've got there anyway. I also may just attach it prior to doing the detail work, just because I want it to make it a bit easier to work with if it's on the base. Take a look at this under here, get the tail. Alright. Rotate a bit. You see all that nice, lovely detail it's bringing out. See, already lost some pigment on those spikes from the big claw. Just pull that around a bit. Alright, now again getting up underneath the crown. Tail. Swish it around on these back of this tail here to make sure we're getting it into all the nooks and crannies. Right. Now, we're still wet on this opposite side, so we just have to be careful to hold onto the crown as we begin our final section. Alright, it in. Go. This side with the tiny hands. Okay. Actually, let's go ahead real quick and clean our brush. Okay, on to this big claw. I look forward to thoroughly terrorizing role-playing people with this. I think that's where the real fun of these large models comes in, is tossing them onto a role-playing table and watch as everyone spazzes out. I mean, come on, look at her. She just wants to give big hugs. Okay. Yep, that's all of that arm. Let's get the inside of the little arms here. And back to the legs. soaking up some of the excess. Oh, and a couple spots that need to be double checked there. Yep. Again, this one ends in a stone, so we're not worried about getting it all the way onto that. Let's try, yep. Okay. Just a little spot there. Nope, and tire underside here. Oh. Hard to get under there. Alright. Last claw. Okay. So let's review. Missing on the other one as well. Let's get that. This leg needs some of the joint here. Alrighty. Pulled away a little all through here. And right in here. bit on this claw there. Yep. So just going around looking for any bare spots. Yep. She's looking pretty good though. Alright, so I'm going to clean this off and fix that one spot on the nozzle. Just kind of darken this with another coat even. Let the really interior be just one coat. So it'll be a little more pale on the inside of the mouth. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and let that sit and dry a little, and then we'll come back and do the crown. So we're going to do the thorns in Skeleton Horde, and the rest of the top will be Agrak Dunes. But like I said, we'll let this dry a bit, and we'll come back to it. So as we can see, we're dried now. Got a couple patches, I think, that need to be gone over again. Nothing too major, though, so we're looking good. So, next up, we're going to do the crown. And, as I said, we're going to start with Agros for the actual top section. The thorns will be done in Skelly, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Agros from the in out to leave the outer ring wet, so we can do the wet blending again when we do the thorns. And I've left some thorns on other spots as well, but mostly we're concerned with the ones around the top. So let us commence. And just start getting this all in here. Down into this crack between the two pieces. The pieces fit solid enough that I wasn't worried about needing to green stuff it. Just make sure it's getting in there and covering every spot that we can. And we're really just focused on getting the central section done right now. We'll get the edges after. Yeah, there we go. Nice thick coat. This is probably the largest thing I've used contrast paints on, but for such an organic piece, they work really well. There's just so many highs and lows. Man, those spines on the bottom feet do dig in a little. Might poor hand. Make sure we're getting under all these ridges and parts. Don't be afraid to just slather it on. I'd almost be tempted to even go with a larger brush, but my dry brushes are the only thing I have that are really larger than this, and I don't want to lose that much control. Coming down the back here. Again, make sure we're getting up into those creases. Yep. Now around the front here, coming down to this side, so that the brush kind of follow the grooves. That'll pull the paint where it needs to go. So don't be afraid to look back and look for any areas that need a bit more. Getting up in those ridges again. Coming down this line. Getting it about as close as I want to with this pass. A little bit more here. Now, around the face here, we don't have any spines, so we can come all the way down and not really worry about it. So we're going to come in here and get along this line. We want to make sure that we're not dripping when we get to the joint between the two. We don't mind if we kind of fill in where we've painted already, but we don't want any runs into the other color at this stage. So we're going to be a little lighter than we have been, and we're going to put it up higher and kind of bring it down so that we're just getting into the same spot there. And that's as far as we want to take that. Let's make sure we're pulling any excess around the other side. We'll do the same thing here. Start high and pull it down. Just stopping where we start to see these toothy spines. me just pick up the rest here. Again, letting it flow into the crevices. Seeing all this lovely detail. You just see how that's flowing so nicely around. Alright, a little bit more here. Up under there. Okay, so we're going to start working up to these spines. And even onto their first lower section here. As I said, we want to blend, so we're not too worried about getting them on the spines, but we don't need to overly saturate it. And then under the spines as well needs a little bit of brown. And we want to work fast because we're going to want to blend. So if we need to swap colors before we get any drying, we'll do that as well. That's another reason we're applying it thick here, is it'll be longer to dry. All these gaps in between them, and then just coming under, getting the lip. Perfect. A little bit here, make sure we've got all of this underside. Again, with the underside, we don't want to be super heavy because we don't want it dripping down. So let's start applying here. Coming through nice and quick. I'm not afraid to go back and fix any issues we may be seeing. Into the underside. There we go. A bit more here. I skipped wearing gloves today simply because there's enough paint on it now. I'm not overly concerned about flaking stuff off. Alright, so before it gets too dry to blend, I'm going to switch over quickly to our skeleton horde. Be careful not to touch the crown, which is a shame because that's my favorite handhold. And we're just going to go in here and start hitting these teeth. And there's not going to be much of a color difference, really, I've noticed between them, especially if we blend. And we're going to need to, due to the blending, repeatedly clean the brush. So one thing you can do is kind of feather it on the tips before working down. And there is, it is a lighter color, so you should be seeing a little difference. The smaller ones, not as much, simply because it's going to be harder to tell. So you really only want to blend around the bottom of the spine. Just trying to keep that darker tone off the brush as much as possible. Apply some underneath here. And then do the blending. Alright, around to this side. And again, let's just try and hit all of these spines real quick. And then come under them. Tips first. This one has a lot of side profile. Alright, now we'd start the blend. And then under. Few more to go. I said not a huge amount of difference right now. When they'll really start to change is as we darken the carapace top. That will really help show the difference. And under. And then let's just go ahead and blend the small ones. Obviously, they're going to take up a lot more of the dark since there's not as much to kind of work around. And around the underside. Okay. Alright. A couple more teeth to fix here. This tiny one there. This big old mouth one. Should be under it. Same with its opposite one on the side. Sure, we're getting under there. Oh, this one needs a little bit more. There we go. Now, I'm also going to go ahead and take this opportunity to try and hit the little teeth in the undermouth. Darken them up a bit. So we're going to be very careful to go in and just kind of apply it to all the spiky teeth. Just to give it a little more of a carapace look. It's a little hard to see, but get them in there. Just focus that up a bit, and you can kind of tell. Alright, so we're going to let this dry. We're going to take a look, see any missing spots first. Some there, yeah. Alright, otherwise, looks pretty good. Work under there, a little bit there. Alright, so we'll let that dry, and then we'll start working in some extra colors to kind of change it up a little. Alright, so everything is dried now. I've even done a second coat of, what was that? Agros Dunes over the shell, and you can definitely see the difference between the spines and the shell now. So next up, what we're going to be doing is kind of speckling in some color here and there and kind of blending it, and you know, just kind of being a little messy with it, trying to get some colors. So for this, we're going to use some primary colors. So I'm using Ultramarines blue, a Flesh Terrors red, and Dark Angels green. You can go lighter than this, it just all depends on what you want your results to be. I'm also using some Gore Grunt of Fur as a primary blend. And so what I'm going to do, since we are trying to wet blend a lot of this, is I'm only going to work on smaller sections at a time. Even more so what we did than with the shell and everything. So what I'm going to try and do first is just work on this big claw. So let's take a look here. I'm going to start with my Flesh Terrors red. And so what I'm just kind of do is, wherever I see these speckles, there should be like barnacles and whatnot, I'm just going to go in here and just taking a dry brush and just kind of applying it randomly over the arm. And then, since I'm done with that, I'm going to move on to my next color, which will be my green. I'm just going to open these all because I kind of want to work quickly. Then my blue and my brown. Okay, so just going to go in here with the green next. Didn't get much on the cup there. Just kind of apply. Don't be afraid to put it wherever you've applied some others. So we're just trying to get it all on here first. I'll do more of the blending with the brown, whereas the other three I'm just trying to get some color on to the model. And also don't be afraid, since we're just speckling stuff on, to already get some mixing going. Because we're not going back to the pot, because we're doing smaller sections. Now for the brown, and I'm just going to come in here wherever I think I see too much color. I'm going to start kind of applying that and kind of working that in a bit. And now let's just kind of blend everything together, working to wherever I see too much color. The reds I kind of like coming up, and since I'm ending with the brown, the reds will still show. So just kind of mixing this all up. And don't be afraid if it looks kind of janky. You can always just go in and work in more colors. So right there, we can see we're already getting some coloring in there. It looks a little startled next to all the other gray. The final part of working on this is going to be to apply a Agrax Earth Shade over the entire model. So that will really help bring the colors together by applying that top layer. So don't be afraid at this stage if it's not too perfect. The Agrax will really pull it all together. Plus, as I said, if you've got a spot that's really like, oh, that's just, you know, I don't want that blue, I don't want, you know, that green's just too much, you know, go over it with the Gorgrunta fur that we're using. Since it is a darker brown, it'll help cover up a lot. That's why I'm using it as a last piece. It can really mix in. So what I'm going to try and do here is just work on all these legs real quick and the side and everything. One thing I did do is I went back and picked out some extra spines along the back here. So when I did them in gray, I kind of covered them up a bit. So I've gone ahead and just picked those out with base coat and painted them up like the other spines. So we're going to go with red, and I'm just going to hit everything. We're just kind of dabbing here, there, and everywhere. Alright, a little bit more here. Trying to get in and around. So see how we've kind of got that all over. Now we're going to take our green and do the same. Little specks here, there. Don't forget our tiny hands. Especially when we be careful that first place that you kind of punch with this is going to take up a lot of that. So you want to be easy, or even not put as much contrast as you would normally. As you can see, some of this I'm getting it on and just wiping it off a bit. And then I'm going to go in, and so I'm going to start in different areas There we go, get those blues in there a bit. And on this side, okay. Like right there you can see it's all kind of a mess. But now we're going to take that brown, providing the lid will stay open a bit. And we're just going to try and really get it in there. Kind of pass it about a bit. Kind of wherever we've got color nearby. We're not trying to cover up the color. We're just trying to have it show up at the same spots. And then once we've got it all in there, we're just going to kind of work it in. Move the rest. And we're just really, if you've ever taken a look at a lobster, especially, you know, before it's been steamed and turned red, that's kind of what we're going for, is a very patchwork mottled effect. Don't, like I said, don't worry if it looks a little too much. That first time that we go over it with Agrax will really help. And we do want some of those colors to be bleeding through. So we still want to see blues and reds, hints of them at least. Alright. On to the tail next. You can also use this to fix areas that might be light in pigment. So just looking at the tail, it's not necessarily mist, but we can see here and here. It's a little paler, same there. So we know we want to target those areas with some color so that we can kind of balance it out. So let's go under there a bit, around here a bit. Kind of want to make sure we're getting stuff on each of the fins and even up under. We're avoiding the spines because those don't need color. That back spine might need to be fixed, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Simply because I'm putting my hands on this so much, I know I may pull some color off of those spines, so I'm going to worry about fixing those last. Alright, so wherever we put this red, we also want to have some green. Kind of mix this two together. Under there a bit, and over there. And then our blue. Again, wiping off a good chunk of that. And just comes in. Adds that in too. Now, Oliver Rydell, who kind of posted about this way of doing it, as I mentioned before, he used lighter shades of these colors, whereas I'm using darker ones. That's just because that's my preference. But the main thing is we're just trying to kind of blend it all together. Like I said, once the wash goes over, it'll darken all the lighter sections and kind of tie everything together. Alright. Ugh. This one just really does not want to stay open. Let's try that. Holding by the head because I've got the other side still a little wet. And I'm not going to do the claw, I'm just trying to come in here and do all around it first. And onto the legs. green. Just trying to get that color in with the rest of it. Then, before I move on to doing the top shell and any other pickup work, we're going to go ahead and mount this to the base so I can stop holding it all the time. Alright. Now the big claw. Green. Nice mixture of all these colors. With that blue. All right, and apply the brown. Then come back and just kind of blend her all around. Alright, and we can actually see the dried sections here kind of blending and making some interesting patterns, so that's what we're going for. Okay, now last thing to finish up the lower, so we're not going to worry about the underside here because that's not going to be seen. We are worried about the chest and the other section of small arms though. So we're going to get some dabs on there and around here and on the tiny arms. So just kind of covering that internal work. I'm not going to do too terribly much with the mouth section. I've already gotten the teeth browned out a bit. I may take some of this Gorgunta and apply some. Oh, I've grabbed it now. Don't talk about a color you're not ready to apply. Your brain takes over. So onto the green. And we're just going to come in and dab that as well. Just trying to get this all kind of mixed in. Good. Blue. Alright, now we go in with the brown. And you may even choose to apply these in a different order. Don't be afraid to experiment some. That's why I did some of the regular Mirelurks first, was so I could practice this technique. Alright. So that's going to need to dry a bit so that we can safely handle it while mounting it to the base. The base has already been sealed, so I will have to scrape off areas in order to properly apply glue to get it to mount. And I'm just going to go in here now with a bit of this Gorgrunta and just kind of hit the tips of that little bitey mouth. I'm not trying to get it in the interior of it because I want to keep the fleshiness. But there, that should do. Give it a little dark, bitey feeling inside there. Yeah, you can just see it. Alright, so we will get this, let this dry, get this mounted, and come back as we start to work on the shell. Okay, so as we can see, I have not actually mounted the queen to her base just yet, and the reason for that is I'm apparently out of glue. So always be sure when working on a project to make sure your supplies are good. What I have done is gone through here, let me just focus this in, and scratched away the paint at some primary connecting points so I can show how she mounts. So she'll sit just like this. You can see she pretty much owns this rock here. And yeah, she's looking good. Now also you can see now that the body's had a chance to dry, how that all those reds and everything have kinda made a nice shimmering effect. The tail's looking good. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that right now. So we're going to just move on to doing the crown. As I mentioned before, I'm not touching the face because I want the face to remain as it is. I think it looks pretty good as is. Nope. This is the problem with GW paints. You got to make sure to latch those down. So, for future reference. Alright, so let's go ahead and prep all of our paints. Just get these ready. As we know, the Gorgrunta fur especially does not like to stay up, so just kind of push that tab there. Alright, so I'm going to try and do this all in one swath, as it were. Otherwise, what I would do is properly split it up between this back and front section. So let's get some paint on the brush. And I'm also going to look for anywhere that the paint has started rubbing. So you can see, and this is the problem with holding the miniature, I've already rubbed some of the paint off in a couple spots. So what I'm going to do is cover those spots up. And this comes from holding it just like that. And you can see even over here. So let's use our stippling to fix that. Alright, and we're not getting down onto the thorns, just applying to her shell here. Okay, so that's good enough. Very lightly setting her down. I will be going out real quickly today to grab some glue while she dries. Problem being that currently there's a bit of a run on gas where I'm at, so kind of hard to get out and do stuff. Okay, looking good. Green gives a nice dark blend. And come through with blue. Also looking for anywhere that I haven't applied color. If it's too big of a patch, I want to fix that. And this is just our first pass with coloring. We can always apply more later. So don't feel that you have to apply a lot in your first pass. It can be better to apply just a little, especially if this is your first time working with the technique. Again, I recommend using it on one of the regular Mirelurks first. And now we're just gonna really get that brown. We're just trying to make sure that we work it all around. I'm also kind of leaving this little piece here because I like having that clear. Okay. So we're going to let that dry and see if we need to apply any more. Because remember, the overall plan is to go ahead and okay, no, it's just a wet spot. Brown wash the Agrax Earth Shade over it, which will really blend and tone the whole thing down. So what we may do is apply a coat of Agrax, see how that looks first, then apply more if needed, and then a little more Agrax. You know, just back and forth trying to see. But based on how the bottom dried, and I'm really happy with that, the bottom I definitely don't need to add any more to. So we will see how the top dries up and go from there. Okay, so we have let our contrast blending dry a bit, and I'm going to go ahead and apply my earth shade over the whole model now, just to get an idea of where we're at. Like I said, I may come back. Oop, and I don't want to use my gloss for once. Saving that for terrain stuff, so hold on. Make sure I grab the right stuff. I don't want the gloss to detract from me trying to see if I like where we're at or not. Alright, so we're just going to start at the top, work our way down. I'm using a nice larger brush to apply it because we are trying to get it all over. And it doesn't have to be super thick because we don't want to lose any of our details or color blending that we've got going on. Sorry, let me focus that in a bit. But we do want to make sure we have enough. Make sure we're getting all of these. Again, very lightly touching. Now, this is a bit much on these spines, so what I'm going to do is kind of pull some of that off. And what this will mean is I'll go back and do some dry brushing on the spines to lighten them a little later on. But it is doing a good job of picking up the cracks and whatnot within them, so we don't want to avoid them, we just don't want to overpower their lighter shade. Okay, so that's the top done. And now we're just going to let it lean back a bit and kind of work around the face here. Get up and under. We're not going to apply, so I'm not applying like a fresh dip onto the inner part of the face, simply because I don't want to darken the inside a lot. I want to keep that interior mouth fleshy. But we want to come down the chest here, get our little hands. Since we're using a larger brush, try and be careful not to jar the miniature too much. We don't want to scrape any paint off by accident. Alright, let's start getting this, our big old claw here, and along the sides of the little one there. Okay. Looking good. Get up underneath the crown here. Make sure the underside of these thorns are good. Also, if any paint has collected, we can move that around. Start getting these legs here. So really I'm also paying attention to anywhere I think is too light. If I want it dark, I will apply a really thin coat on the underside here. It's not going to be seen, but I'll know if I've done it or not. Alright, coming around to the tail and this last leg. Again, making sure we're getting it into those gaps between the legs. Alright, so starting to be a little problematic to hold this. So what we want is to rotate a little, and I'm just going to do the tail, and then I'm going to let it dry a bit. Simply because I don't want to rub any of the wash off where I've applied it. Going a little heavy on the tail because I really want to darken that a bit. Okay, so now we're going to allow it to sit, dry, and we'll finish the last third or quarter or so of the model around the side. And then we'll review it. So I'll do that off camera once it dries, and then I'll come back with it all dried, and we can review how it looks. Already, just looking at the crown, let's go ahead and focus in on there where it's sitting. You can see how all the color is now once we've taken that brown wash over it. It's reduced the definition, so it's all kind of blending together nicely, I think. You still have your independent color of reds especially sticking out. You can see some blues, a couple greens, but they're all worked together, so that's really what I wanted to see. So I don't think I'll need to apply any more of the contrast. I kind of like where it's at. We'll just finish and come back once it's dry. Okay, as we can see, I did make it out to score some glue and attach to the base. Let's see how we're doing. Alright, so we are attached. It doesn't feel overly secure because, the front claws aren't really on the base, so it's a little annoying, but it's held by that big old tail in the back, so it should be fine. But yep, so as we can see, let's just go ahead and there we are. The crown, I think, came out looking good just the way it is. She's a big old girl, but she is looking great. Alright, so what I want to do is go ahead and do some light dry brushing on the spikes here. So I'm just going to take my Wraithbone base, get a bit of it on this dry brush, and just kind of work it in. There we go, just about completely gone. And all we're doing is just some very light almost imperceptible is the way we want it. Not even going to do the underside. We're just going to very lightly hit the ones that are under the crown because I don't want to run the risk of hitting anything else. You can see on the side there how nice and mottled that all is, especially the red showing up. As I mentioned, the addition of the wash really ties everything together nicely, I think. Alright, so next up is fixing the rocks where the legs are connected. So we're just going to take our Necromancer cloak real quick. Not even going to bother watering it because it's just such a small, quick application here. And we're just going to come in here and blend that into the rock that it is now glued to. So just trying to match it. Then over on this side, you can see we've got a couple of them. Got this guy. I know what happened here is I did not glue that guy in, I think. That's why it's so loose. That's fine. He's still attached quite well. She, I mean. Okay. Alright. And there we go. Okay, so we're going to give that a couple minutes to dry. And then we are going to go ahead and seal this bad girl. And then we'll come back and we're going to apply some tufts. And we're actually going to apply some tufts to the carapace itself as well. I'm going for a look where she's been submerged and is kind of, it's been like an island, so there'll be some foliage growth, that sort of thing. And we will adjust from there. It really doesn't want to focus down. There we go. But yeah, so she's all attached to the base now. We've fixed the spots where she's connected. So on to sealing and then final touches. Okay, so the queen is now sealed. So if we just take a look here, we can see all of our colors are still shining through. She is a little, this is more of a satin on the sealant I've got right now. I'm all out of my testers that I really like. But it's fine, she's coming out of the water. She can have a little glisten to her. So, next up, we want to apply some tufts to both the base and her shell to kind of bring that all together. So I'm using Army Painter Highland tufts. This is my preferred tufts to use. So it comes on a sheet from small to large, and doesn't have that excess dirt on the bottom like the other ones do. Which, the dirt's not a problem if you like it, it's fine. But since I like to do washes and whatnot, and sometimes it doesn't exactly match, so I just prefer to use these. So, we're going to take some of these large tufts first, and apply them to the base. We'll probably do a couple different sizes. And so what we want to look for is areas that might not be as detailed. It's like right here up against there. So kind of get that put in there. And again, we're doing this after sealing because the sealant spray will cause these to gum up the fibers and get kind of hard. So they wind up not working very well at all then. Okay, let's just put that here on top of this one. And then let's go to our medium size and put at least one or two of these on the base. I mentioned earlier I really like putting tufts inside tires. Because if you think about it, that's where seeds and stuff will get trapped anyway. So that looks good. And then one more, I think. And we're just going to put that here. So not overwhelming the base, but just kind of enhancing it. I actually think I want one more of the large ones. I like to use the large Tufts on these large bases because they don't really get much use on the regular bases. So these are great to put them on scenery and these large ones. So put that there. Alright, now we're going to take the smaller Tufts and we're going to put those in a couple spots all over her head. And that will just kind of, I think anyway, make it look like she's had some time to have dirt and whatnot kind of encrust her shell. So I'm looking at putting it in like these little divot areas. And using the small ones this way means I can really tuck them in and they're not going to overwhelm her shell. And we don't want to mirror, so I'm going to go further down. Also, you can look and see if there's anywhere that's rubbed off paint and apply them there. So I'm going to put this one here. And then let's have a little bit of paint kind of wearing off there. So just going to apply that to there. Check this other side. And let's kind of put this down here towards the bottom of the shell. There we go. Make sure. Perfect. All right. So, as we can see, she is looking all kinds of fabulous here. Really shows off how big by having those Tufts on there. All of that detail on the base is looking nice. Mouth area still nice and pale, so that's just gorgeous. Okay, so there we are, the Mirelurk Queen complete. Hopefully I got an email that my new Vegas wave has been sent, and I've seen some people overseas getting it. Since I ordered from Modifius, should be here next week, so providing it does show up when it says, we will have an unboxing next week of the new Vegas minis. So stay tuned for that.